The morning sun cast long shadows across Camp Pendleton's shooting range as Staff Sergeant Maria Santos stepped out of the armory carrying what looked like a child's toy. Her custom rifle gleamed bright pink in the California sunlight, its hot pink coating catching every eye on the range. The weapon was a precision-built long-range rifle, but, to the Marines gathering for qualification day, it looked like something that belonged in a toy store. "What the hell is that supposed to be?" Corporal Jake Mitchell called out, his voice carrying across the concrete. He was a tall, broad-shouldered man from Texas who'd never met a regulation he didn't love or a tradition he wouldn't defend. "Did you raid your daughter's bedroom, Santos?" Maria didn't respond immediately. She'd heard worse in her 12 years of service. Being one of the few female Marines in her unit had taught her to let her actions speak louder than her words. She set the rifle case down on the shooting bench and began her methodical preparation routine, checking each component with the precision of a surgeon. "Seriously, though," continued Private Rodriguez, emboldened by the laughter rippling through the group. "Pink. In the Corps? That's not regulation, Sergeant. Show me where the manual says what color a personal rifle has to be," Maria replied calmly, not looking up from her equipment check. Her voice carried the quiet authority of someone who'd earned her stripes the hard way. "Long as it meets performance standards, color doesn't matter." The laughter grew louder. Sergeant First Class Tommy Chun, a veteran with 3 deployments under his belt, shook his head in disbelief. "Come on, Santos. This is the Marine Corps, not a fashion show. What's next? Matching pink boots." Maria had expected this reaction. When she'd had the rifle customized 6 months ago, she knew it would draw attention. The pink wasn't a fashion statement or an attempt to make some feminist point. It was deeply personal, tied to a promise she'd made to someone who couldn't be there to see her shoot. Her daughter Emma had been diagnosed with breast cancer at just 28 years old. During the long nights in the hospital, watching her daughter fight for her life, Maria had made a vow. If Emma survived, Maria would honor her in every way she could. Emma had always joked that her tough Marine mom needed more pink in her life. When Emma's treatment succeeded and she went into remission, Maria kept her promise. "Target practice is at 1,500 meters today," announced Captain Williams as he approached the group. He was a by-the-book officer who'd climbed the ranks through excellence rather than politics. "We've got some VIPs coming to observe, so let's show them what Marines can do." The captain's eyes fell on Maria's rifle, and he raised an eyebrow, but said nothing. He'd worked with Santos long enough to know that beneath her quiet exterior was one of the finest marksmen he'd ever commanded. Her service record spoke for itself. Expert marksman badge, multiple commendations, and a reputation for making impossible shots under pressure. 1,500 meters? Scoffed Mitchell. "That's barely a warm-up. Some of us have been shooting since we could walk." He gestured toward his own rifle, a standard-issue M40A6 that looked exactly like regulation intended. None of this custom nonsense needed. Maria finished assembling her rifle and ran her hand along its distinctive surface. The weapon was far from standard issue. She'd spent months working with a master gunsmith to create something that matched her exact specifications. The pink Cerakote finish wasn't just for show. It actually provided better corrosion resistance than standard military coatings. The stock was custom-fitted to her measurements, the trigger tuned to her exact preferences, and the scope mounted with precision that bordered on obsession. "What's the effective range on that thing anyway?" asked Corporal Sarah Kim, one of the few other women in the unit. Unlike the men, her question carried genuine curiosity rather than mockery. Kim had always respected Maria's shooting abilities, even if she didn't understand the pink choice. "Depends on conditions," Maria replied, settling into her shooting position. "But she'll reach out and touch whatever needs touching." The range officer began calling out instructions for the day's qualification. Marines would fire at targets placed at various distances, starting close and working their way out to the maximum range of 1,500 meters. It was a standard exercise, designed to test both accuracy and consistency under different conditions. As the first shooters took their positions, the mockery continued. Private Johnson, fresh out of boot camp and eager to prove himself, made exaggerated comments about pretty pink pop guns, loud enough for everyone to hear. Even some of the senior enlisted men chuckled, though a few kept their opinions to themselves. Maria had learned long ago that the Marine Corps was still adjusting to having women in combat roles. She joined when opportunities were more limited, and had fought for every assignment, every school, every chance to prove herself. The pink rifle represented something deeper than just honoring her daughter. It was a statement that she could be both a Marine and a woman, that excellence didn't require abandoning femininity. The morning qualification began with predictable results. Most Marines performed adequately at the shorter distances, their scores falling within expected ranges. As the targets moved further out, the difficulty increased, and scores began to separate the experienced shooters from the novices. Mitchell performed well, his Texas upbringing and natural ability serving him reliably. His shots grouped tightly at all distances, earning nods of approval from the observing officers. Chin struggled slightly with the longer distances, but maintained respectable accuracy. The newer Marines faced increasing challenges as the range extended beyond their comfort zones. "Santos, you're up," called the range officer as the rotation reached Maria's turn. She moved to the firing line with fluid efficiency, her movements economical and practiced. Setting up her pink rifle drew fresh comments from the gallery of waiting Marines. "$10 says she can't hit the broadside of a barn with that thing," whispered Johnson to his buddy. "You're on," replied Private Davis. "But I think you're about to lose your money." Maria settled into her shooting position, her body finding the familiar comfort of proper form. She'd spent countless hours perfecting her technique, understanding that consistent accuracy required muscle memory that transcended conscious thought. Her breathing slowed, her heart rate decreased, and the world narrowed to the essential elements: wind conditions, distance calculation, and target acquisition. The first target stood at 300 meters. For an experienced marksman, it was almost insultingly easy. Maria's shot rang out, and the spotter immediately called hit center mass. The murmuring among the observers quieted slightly, but 300 meters proved nothing that a decent shooter couldn't accomplish. The targets moved progressively outward. 600 meters, 900 meters, 1200 meters. Each shot found its mark with mechanical precision, Maria's pink rifle proving its capabilities despite its unconventional appearance. The mockery gradually faded as the distances increased, and her accuracy remained constant. At 1,500 meters, the maximum range for the day's qualification, only a handful of Marines had managed to hit the target consistently. Maria's turn arrived amid a much quieter group of observers. The wind had picked up slightly, adding complexity to an already challenging shot. She studied the conditions carefully, noting the direction and intensity of air movement across the range. Her rifle scope was calibrated perfectly, but successful long-range shooting required understanding dozens of variables that could affect bullet trajectory. Temperature, humidity, altitude, and wind all played crucial roles in determining where a bullet would strike at extreme distances. The shot echoed across the range, and the spotter's call came immediately. Hit center ring. Maria had placed her bullet within inches of the target center at a distance where many Marines struggled to hit anywhere on the target. "Lucky shot," muttered Mitchell, though his tone carried less conviction than before. Captain Williams checked his watch and made a note on his clipboard. The morning qualification was proceeding on schedule, and the visiting VIPs would arrive soon for the afternoon demonstration. He'd planned something special for their guests, something that would showcase the exceptional skills of his Marines. As the last shooter completed the 1,500-meter stage, the range officer announced a break for lunch. Marines began cleaning their weapons and securing their equipment, the morning's performance already becoming the subject of analysis and comparison. Maria disassembled her rifle with the same methodical care she'd shown during assembly. The pink coating showed no wear from the morning's shooting, and the weapon's performance had been flawless. She'd qualified expert once again, though she knew the real test would come later. "Not bad shooting, Santos," admitted Corporal Kim as they walked toward the mess hall. "That rifle of yours seems to work pretty well, color aside." "It does what I need it to do," Maria replied simply. Behind them, she could hear continued discussion about her unconventional weapon choice. Some Marines remained skeptical, attributing her success to luck or favorable conditions. Others had begun to reconsider their initial judgments, though few would admit it openly. The afternoon promised to bring new challenges, and Maria knew that her pink rifle would face its ultimate test. The visiting dignitaries expected to see something exceptional, and Captain Williams had hinted that the day's exercises would push every Marine beyond their normal limits. As they entered the mess hall, Maria thought about her daughter Emma, now healthy and pursuing her own career as a pediatric nurse. The pink rifle wasn't just a tool for her. It was a reminder of what really mattered, of promises kept, and battles won off the battlefield as well as on it. The afternoon would tell whether her unconventional choice would be vindicated or whether the doubters would have the last laugh. Either way, Maria Santos was ready for whatever challenge lay ahead. The afternoon sun blazed overhead as a convoy of black SUVs pulled up to the shooting range. Marine sentries snapped to attention as the vehicles disgorged their passengers, a mixture of Pentagon officials, defense contractors, and foreign military observers. Captain Williams straightened his uniform and approached the group, his game face firmly in place. "Welcome to Camp Pendleton," he announced to the assembled visitors. "I'm Captain Williams, and today you'll witness some of the finest marksmanship in the world. Our Marines train for precision under any conditions, and today we'll demonstrate capabilities that go far beyond standard qualification requirements." Among the visitors stood General Patricia Hayes, a two-star general known for her interest in advanced small arms technology. Beside her walked Dr. James Morrison, a civilian contractor developing next-generation sniper systems for the military. Several international observers completed the group, including Colonel Hans Müller from Germany and Major Yuki Tanaka from Japan's self-defense forces. The Marines had reassembled on the range, their weapons cleaned and ready for the afternoon demonstration. The morning's qualification had been standard procedure, but Captain Williams had planned something more ambitious for his guests. Today would test the absolute limits of his marksman's abilities. The targets you'll observe today are placed at distances ranging from 2,000 to 6,000 meters, Williams explained to the VIP group. At these ranges, we're pushing the boundaries of what's possible with small arms. Success requires not just exceptional skill, but equipment capable of performing at the very edge of physics. Staff Sergeant Santos stood with her unit, her pink rifle drawing curious glances from the visiting officials. General Hayes noticed the unusual weapon immediately, her eyebrows raising in surprise. She'd seen thousands of military rifles during her career, but never one that looked like it belonged in a toy store. "Captain," the general inquired quietly, "what's the story with that rifle?" "Staff Sergeant Santos is one of our finest marksmen, ma'am," Williams replied. "The rifle is custom-built to her specifications. I know the color is unconventional, but her results speak for themselves." Dr. Morrison overheard the conversation and approached for a closer look. His eyes immediately recognized the quality of the weapon's construction, noting details that escaped casual observation. "Interesting choice of coating," he murmured. "Cerakote finish, custom stock, high-end optics. Someone knows what they're doing." The range officer began setting up targets at unprecedented distances. The 2,000-meter targets required spotting scopes for observers to see clearly. At 4,000 meters, the targets appeared as tiny specks even through binoculars. The 6,000-meter target was barely visible to the naked eye, a small white square against the distant hillside. "Ladies and gentlemen," Captain Williams addressed the group, "what you're about to witness represents the pinnacle of precision shooting. These distances exceed the effective range of most military sniper systems. Success at these ranges requires perfect conditions, perfect equipment, and exceptional skill." Corporal Mitchell stepped forward as the first shooter. His confidence remained high despite the dramatically increased distances, and his standard-issue rifle had performed well during morning qualification. He settled into position at the 2,000-meter line, studying the distant target through his scope. The wind had shifted since morning, now coming from the southwest with variable intensity. At extreme distances, even slight air movement could push bullets several feet off target. Mitchell made his calculations, adjusted his scope, and fired. The spotter called miss, low and right. Mitchell's bullet had struck the earth well short of the target, the distance proving more challenging than anticipated. He fired again, adjusting his aim point significantly higher. Miss, still low. After 5 attempts, Mitchell managed to strike the target once, his bullet catching the outer edge of the scoring area. The visiting officials took notes, their expressions neutral but attentive. 2,000 meters was pushing the limits of what standard military rifles could accomplish reliably. Sergeant Chen attempted the same distance with similar results. His 3 hits out of 5 attempts represented solid performance, though not the spectacular demonstration Captain Williams had hoped to showcase. The international observers exchanged glances, their assessment of American marksmanship capabilities taking shape based on these early results. "Perhaps we should move to the intermediate distance," suggested Colonel Mueller diplomatically. 4,000 meters seems quite ambitious for standard equipment. Captain Williams felt the subtle criticism in the German officer's tone. The demonstration was intended to showcase American military excellence, but so far the results had been merely competent rather than exceptional. He needed something to change the dynamic, to show these visitors capabilities that would genuinely impress them. "Staff Sergeant Santos," he called. "Let's see what you can do at 2,000 meters." Maria approached the firing line as conversations among the VIPs continued in multiple languages. She could sense the skepticism in their voices, could feel the weight of representing not just herself, but American military capabilities. Her pink rifle drew fresh attention as she set up her shooting position. Dr. Morrison moved closer to observe her technique, his professional interest piqued by the unusual weapon. Through his binoculars, he watched Maria's methodical preparation, noting the precision of her movements and the quality of her equipment setup. The first shot rang out, and the spotter immediately called "hit, center ring." The conversations among the visitors stopped abruptly. Maria fired again. "Hit, center ring." And again. "Hit, center ring." 5 shots, 5 center hits at 2,000 meters. The visiting officials focused their binoculars on the distant target, confirming what the spotter had called. Where other Marines had struggled to hit the target at all, the woman with the pink rifle had placed every shot within inches of the bullseye. "Impressive," admitted Major Tanaka. "Very impressive indeed." General Hayes stepped closer to examine Maria's rifle more carefully. The pink coating no longer seemed amusing or unprofessional. Instead, it marked a weapon that had just delivered performance far exceeding anything else they'd witnessed. "Staff Sergeant," the general inquired, "what's the effective range of your weapon system?" "Depends on conditions, ma'am," Maria replied respectfully. "But with proper ammunition and favorable weather, she'll reach out considerably further than 2,000 meters. Captain Williams seized the moment. "General, if you'd like to see something truly exceptional, we could attempt the 4,000-meter target." The suggestion sent murmurs through the group of observers. 4,000 meters pushed beyond the range of most military sniper systems, entering territory usually reserved for specialized anti-material rifles. Success at such distances required not just skill, but equipment capabilities that few possessed. Dr. Morrison consulted his notes and looked skeptical. "Captain, 4,000 meters is extremely challenging even under perfect conditions. Wind drift alone becomes a major factor at that distance." "Staff Sergeant Santos has made shots at that range before," Williams replied, though privately he wondered if he was pushing too hard. The morning qualification had gone well, but 4,000 meters represented a significant step up in difficulty. Maria studied the distant target through her scope, calculating the complex variables that would affect her shot. Wind speed had increased slightly, and she could see heat shimmer rising from the ground between her position and the target. Temperature gradients would affect bullet trajectory in unpredictable ways. "I'll need a few minutes to study conditions," she said calmly. The visiting officials settled in to watch, their skepticism clear but their attention focused. The range fell silent as Maria began her preparation routine. She checked wind flags at various distances, noting how air movement changed at different points along the bullet's path. Her calculations became increasingly complex, factoring in not just distance, but the dozens of environmental variables that could affect accuracy. Through her scope, the 4,000-meter target appeared as a small rectangle, its details barely visible even at maximum magnification. Success would require placing a bullet within a target zone smaller than a dinner plate at a distance of nearly 2.5 miles. The first shot thundered across the range, its sound echoing off distant hills. Seconds passed before the spotter's call came back. Hit. Outer ring. The reaction among the VIPs was immediate. Colonel Mueller raised his binoculars, studying the distant target with new respect. General Hayes made notes on her clipboard, her expression shifting from polite interest to genuine attention. Outstanding shooting, Staff Sergeant, called Dr. Morrison. That represents truly exceptional performance. But Maria wasn't finished. She made minute adjustments to her scope and fired again. Hit. Center ring. The conversations among the visitors stopped entirely now. All attention focused on the woman with the pink rifle who was making shots that shouldn't be possible. She fired 3 more rounds, each one striking within the center scoring area. 5 shots at 4,000 meters, all hits, with 4 of them clustered within inches of dead center. The visiting officials stood in stunned silence, their assessment of American military capabilities undergoing rapid revision. Captain Williams, General Hayes spoke slowly. I've never seen shooting like that. Not at those distances, not with that consistency. The demonstration had taken an unexpected turn. What began as a routine showcase of standard military marksmanship had evolved into something extraordinary. The pink rifle that had drawn mockery and laughter now commanded absolute respect from some of the world's most experienced military professionals. There is one more target, Captain Williams said quietly, his voice carrying across the suddenly silent range. 6,000 meters. It's at the absolute limit of what we consider possible. The suggestion hung in the air like a challenge. 6,000 meters, nearly 3.5 miles, pushed beyond the range of anything the visitors had ever witnessed. Most military sniper systems couldn't reach targets reliably at half that distance. Dr. Morrison shook his head slowly. Captain, 6,000 meters isn't just challenging. It's approaching the theoretical maximum for small arms. Wind drift, bullet drop, atmospheric conditions, there are too many variables. Staff Sergeant Santos, General Hayes asked directly. Do you believe you can make that shot? Maria looked toward the distant hillside where the 6,000-meter target waited. Through her scope, it was barely visible, a tiny speck that seemed to waver in the heat shimmer. The shot would require not just skill but luck, perfect timing, and conditions that aligned in her favor. But, as she considered the challenge, she thought about Emma, about the promise she'd made during those long nights in the hospital. The pink rifle represented more than just a weapon. It was a symbol of overcoming impossible odds, of succeeding when everyone expected failure. Yes, ma'am, Maria replied quietly. I believe I can. The range fell into an almost cathedral-like silence as Maria Santos prepared for the most challenging shot of her career. 6,000 meters stretched before her like an impossible chasm, the target barely visible even through the high-powered spotting scopes that the observers now trained on the distant hillside. General Hayes stepped closer to Maria's position, her professional curiosity overcoming protocol. In 30 years of military service, she had never witnessed an attempt at such an extreme distance with conventional equipment. The physics alone seemed to argue against success. Staff Sergeant, she said quietly, I need you to understand what you're attempting. At 6,000 meters, your bullet will fly for nearly 8 seconds. It will drop over 400 feet from its initial trajectory. Even a slight breeze will push it dozens of yards off target. Maria nodded respectfully as she continued her methodical preparation. She had spent years studying long-range ballistics, understanding that success at extreme distances required mastery of variables that most shooters never considered. Altitude, temperature, humidity, air pressure, the rotation of the Earth itself, all would influence where her bullet struck. I understand the challenges, ma'am, she replied. But this rifle and I have been places together. We've made difficult shots before. Dr. Morrison approached with a tablet computer, his screen displaying ballistic calculations for the proposed shot. Staff Sergeant, according to my data, your bullet will need approximately 7.8 seconds to reach the target. In that time, gravity will pull it down 394 feet from its initial trajectory. The wind conditions we're reading will cause roughly 18 feet of lateral drift. The numbers were staggering. Maria would need to aim at a point nearly 400 feet above the target and adjust for wind drift that could push her bullet the width of a football field off course. The margin for error was essentially zero. Captain Williams watched nervously as more senior officers than he had ever dealt with simultaneously focused their attention on one of his Marines. The demonstration had escalated far beyond anything he had planned, but there was no backing down now. The reputation of his unit, perhaps his own career, rested on what happened in the next few minutes. "Staff Sergeant Santos," he said formally, "you are authorized to attempt the shot. Take whatever time you need." Maria settled into her firing position, her body finding the familiar comfort of proper form that had been drilled into her through countless hours of training. The pink rifle felt like an extension of herself as she adjusted it to the precise angle required for such an extreme shot. Through her scope, she began the complex process of reading environmental conditions at multiple points along the bullet's path. Wind flags at various distances showed air movement that changed direction and intensity across the nearly 4-mile span. Heat shimmer rose from the ground in wavering columns that would bend light and affect her ability to aim precisely. Corporal Mitchell and the other Marines watched in silence, their earlier mockery replaced by something approaching awe. They had seen Maria shoot before, had witnessed her exceptional skills during qualification exercises, but this attempt pushed beyond anything they could have imagined. "Jesus," whispered Private Johnson. 6,000 meters. That's like shooting from one end of town to the other." Sergeant Chen studied the distant target through binoculars, shaking his head slowly. "I can barely see the thing, even with optics." "How do you aim at something you can barely see?" The international observers made quiet comments in their native languages, their tone reflecting professional respect mixed with skepticism. Colonel Mueller had commanded sniper units for over a decade, and he understood the mathematics of what Maria was attempting. Major Tanaka consulted his own ballistic data, his calculator confirming the extreme difficulty of the proposed shot. Maria began her final calculations, her mind processing dozens of variables simultaneously. The wind showed a slight lull in intensity, but the direction remained variable. Temperature had increased slightly since morning, which would affect bullet velocity. The target sat at a slightly higher elevation than her position, adding another layer of complexity to her trajectory calculations. She loaded a single round into her rifle's chamber, the action cycling with mechanical precision. The ammunition was match-grade, hand-loaded to exact specifications that maximized accuracy at extreme ranges. Each bullet was weighed and measured to tolerances measured in fractions of grains. "Spotter ready," called the range officer, his voice carrying across the hushed range. Even he seemed affected by the magnitude of what was being attempted. In 20 years of range operations, he had never called a shot at such an extreme distance. Dr. Morrison positioned himself where he could observe both Maria and the distant target. His professional interest was now completely engaged. If successful, this shot would provide data points for ballistic research that could influence future weapons development. General Hayes found herself holding her breath as Maria made final adjustments to her scope. The general had been present for numerous military demonstrations, had witnessed exceptional feats of marksmanship before, but never anything approaching this level of difficulty. Maria's breathing slowed to the deep, rhythmic pattern that preceded her best shots. Her heart rate decreased as her body entered the zone of complete focus that separated exceptional marksmen from merely good ones. The world narrowed to essential elements: wind conditions, target position, trigger control. The pink rifle stock settled firmly against her shoulder, its custom dimensions fitting her perfectly. The trigger, tuned to break at exactly 2 pounds of pressure, waited under her finger. Through the scope, the distant target wavered slightly in the heat shimmer, a tiny rectangle that represented the difference between success and failure. She held her breath, let it out slowly, held it again. The wind showed a momentary lull, the flags hanging more steadily than they had all afternoon. Temperature readings indicated stable conditions. If she was going to attempt this shot, the moment was now. The trigger broke with crystalline precision, the rifle firing with a thunderclap that echoed across the range. The muzzle blast kicked up dust and debris as the bullet began its long journey toward the distant target. For nearly 8 seconds, the bullet flew through space, following a trajectory that arced high above the intervening terrain. Gravity pulled it downward while air resistance gradually slowed its velocity. The slight crosswind pushed against its path, affecting its course in ways that could only be estimated, never predicted with certainty. The observers tracked the bullet's flight through their optics, though at such distances and speeds, actually seeing the projectile was impossible. They watched the target area, waiting for any sign of impact, any indication of whether Maria's calculations had been correct. Time, called Dr. Morrison, consulting his stopwatch. 7.9 seconds had passed since the shot, meaning the bullet should have reached the target area. But, at 6,000 meters, even the sound of impact would take additional seconds to return to their position. The range remained silent as spotters studied the target through high-powered scopes. Seconds stretched into eternity as everyone waited for confirmation of what had happened at the distant hillside. "I see dust," called one of the spotters. "Definite impact near the target area." General Hayes raised her own binoculars, scanning the target zone for any sign of bullet impact. The distance made precise assessment difficult even with optical aids, but there was definitely disturbance in the area around the target. "Confirm that hit," ordered Captain Williams, his voice tight with tension. The head spotter, a senior enlisted man with decades of experience, studied the target carefully through his high-magnification scope. He adjusted focus, checked his field of view, then made a second examination to be certain of what he was seeing. "Hit confirmed," he finally announced. "Target struck, scoring zone." The words hung in the air for a moment before their full meaning registered. Maria Santos, the Marine with the pink rifle who had endured a morning of mockery and skepticism, had just accomplished what should have been impossible. 6,000 meters. A successful hit at a distance that pushed beyond the theoretical limits of small arms accuracy. The shot represented not just exceptional marksmanship, but a mastery of ballistic science that few possessed. General Hayes lowered her binoculars slowly, her expression reflecting professional amazement. "Outstanding, Staff Sergeant. Simply outstanding." Dr. Morrison was already making notes on his tablet, recording data that would be analyzed for months to come. The shot represented a data point that challenged existing understanding of what was possible with precision rifles. The international observers exchanged glances that reflected their revised assessment of American military capabilities. Colonel Mueller approached Maria's position, his earlier skepticism replaced by genuine respect. "Staff Sergeant Santos," he said formally, "that was extraordinary shooting. Truly extraordinary." Captain Williams felt a wave of relief wash over him. The demonstration had succeeded beyond his most optimistic expectations, showcasing capabilities that would be discussed in military circles around the world. But, for Maria, the successful shot meant something different entirely. As she saved her rifle and began her post-shooting routine, she thought about Emma, about promises kept and challenges overcome. The pink coating that had drawn so much ridicule now marked a weapon that had achieved something remarkable. The afternoon was not yet over, however. As word of the successful 6,000-meter shot spread among the Marines on the range, a new dynamic began to develop. What had started as a demonstration for visiting VIPs was becoming something larger, something that would test not just Maria's abilities but the assumptions and prejudices of everyone present. Word of the impossible shot spread across Camp Pendleton like wildfire. Marines from other units began arriving at the range, drawn by reports of a 6,000-meter hit with a pink rifle that seemed to defy both physics and military tradition. The afternoon demonstration had transformed into something unprecedented. General Hayes stood beside Maria's shooting position, examining the custom rifle with the appreciation of someone who understood precision equipment. The pink Cerakote finish that had seemed so inappropriate earlier now appeared to mark a weapon of extraordinary capability. "Staff Sergeant," the general said quietly, "I've been in this business for 30 years. When news of this shot reaches the research community, there will be significant interest. A documented 6,000-meter hit with conventional equipment challenges everything we thought we knew about small arms capabilities." The implications were beginning to dawn on everyone present. This wasn't just an exceptional demonstration of marksmanship. It was a proof of concept that could influence weapons development for years to come. If one Marine with a custom rifle could achieve such results, what might be possible with purpose-built systems? Captain Williams found himself in an unexpected position. His simple afternoon demonstration had attracted attention far beyond anything he had anticipated. Senior officers were making phone calls, contractors were taking notes, and His pink rifle-carrying staff sergeant had become the center of international military interest. "Captain," General Hayes instructed, "I want this range secured. No one else attempts shots at these distances today. I want the target preserved for examination, and I want detailed documentation of everything that happened here." Corporal Mitchell stood among the gathering crowd of Marines, his earlier mockery replaced by stunned silence. The woman he had ridiculed for her non-regulation rifle had just accomplished something that would be discussed in military circles for decades. His standard-issue weapon suddenly seemed inadequate by comparison. "I don't get it," he said to Sergeant Chun. "How does someone make a shot like that? 6,000 meters is like shooting at the next county over." Chun shook his head slowly. "Experience, I guess. Training. And equipment that's way beyond what we carry." He paused, watching Maria methodically clean her rifle. "Maybe we were wrong about the pink thing." The international observers had gathered in a tight group, their conversation animated but conducted in low voices. Major Tanaka was speaking rapidly into his own satellite phone, reporting back to Tokyo about what he had witnessed. Colonel Mueller consulted his notes, trying to calculate the tactical implications of such long-range capabilities. "If this is representative of American sniper capabilities," he murmured to his aide, "we may need to reconsider our own training programs." Dr. Morrison had moved to a laptop computer, entering data from the successful shot into ballistic modeling software. The numbers confirmed what everyone had witnessed, but they also raised troubling questions about existing theoretical limits. "General," he called to Hayes, "the ballistic data is fascinating. According to my calculations, that shot shouldn't have been possible under the existing wind conditions. Either Staff Sergeant Santos got incredibly lucky, or she's operating at a level of skill that we haven't properly documented." Maria overheard the conversation as she completed her equipment maintenance. She understood that her successful shot had implications beyond personal achievement, that military professionals around the world would analyze and debate what had happened here today. "Dr. Morrison," she said respectfully, "it wasn't luck. Long-range shooting is about understanding all the variables and making them work in your favor. Wind, temperature, humidity, bullet characteristics, equipment capabilities. When everything aligns properly, these shots become possible." The contractor studied her with new interest. "Staff Sergeant, your understanding of ballistic principles seems exceptionally advanced. Where did you acquire this level of expertise?" "Years of study and practice," Maria replied. "Reading every technical manual I could find, working with civilian precision shooting experts, testing different equipment combinations until I found what worked best." She gestured toward her pink rifle. "This weapon represents 5 years of experimentation and refinement." General Hayes had been listening to the exchange with growing appreciation. "Staff Sergeant Santos, I'm going to ask you a direct question. In your professional opinion, what's the maximum effective range of your weapon system under optimal conditions?" The question hung in the air like a challenge. Maria considered her response carefully, understanding that whatever she said would be analyzed and possibly tested by people with significant resources and authority. "Ma'am, under perfect conditions, no wind, stable temperature, optimal ammunition, favorable terrain, I believe accurate hits are possible at ranges approaching 8,000 meters." The statement sent murmurs through the gathered observers. 8,000 meters pushed into territory reserved for specialized anti-material rifles, weapons designed for destroying equipment rather than precision marksmanship. Dr. Morrison looked up from his computer screen. "Staff Sergeant, 8,000 meters would require bullet flight times approaching 12 seconds. Atmospheric conditions alone would make accurate prediction nearly impossible." "Nearly impossible?" "Yes, sir," Maria agreed. "But not completely impossible. With sufficient preparation time, detailed environmental data, and favorable conditions, extraordinary shots become achievable." Captain Williams realized that his afternoon demonstration had evolved into something with potential national security implications. If one of his Marines possessed capabilities that exceeded existing military understanding, higher authorities would want to know about it immediately. "General," he said carefully, "perhaps we should consider additional testing under controlled conditions. If Staff Sergeant Santos can reliably achieve results at these distances, it could influence training and equipment procurement decisions." The suggestion sparked immediate interest among the visiting officials. The possibility of documenting and replicating such exceptional performance could provide the American military with capabilities that other nations lacked. Colonel Mueller approached Maria directly, his manner respectful but probing. Staff Sergeant, in the German military we have excellent marksmen, but nothing approaching what you demonstrated today. Would you be willing to share some of your techniques with international allies? The question raised issues beyond Maria's authority to address. Sharing military capabilities with foreign officers, even allied ones, required approval from higher authorities and consideration of national security implications. Sir, that would be a decision for officers well above my pay grade, she replied diplomatically. I'm happy to discuss general shooting principles, but specific techniques and equipment details would require proper authorization. General Hayes nodded approvingly at Maria's response. The staff sergeant understood the sensitivity of what she had accomplished and was handling the situation with appropriate caution. I think it's time to wrap up today's activities, the general announced. This has been an exceptional demonstration, but we need to consider the implications carefully before proceeding further. As the VIPs began departing, each made a point of personally congratulating Maria on her remarkable achievement. The pink rifle that had been the subject of mockery hours earlier was now being photographed and studied by some of the world's most experienced military professionals. Corporal Mitchell approached Maria as she packed her equipment, his earlier arrogance replaced by genuine humility. Staff Sergeant, I owe you an apology. What I said this morning was way out of line. Maria looked at him steadily. Corporal, we all make judgments based on limited information. What matters is being willing to change our minds when we learn more. Yes, ma'am, he replied. I learned something today about not judging equipment by its appearance. As the range began to empty, Maria reflected on the day's events. Her pink rifle had proven itself in the most dramatic way possible, silencing critics and earning respect from military professionals around the world. But, more importantly, she had kept the promise she had made to Emma, honoring her daughter while demonstrating that excellence could take many forms. The sun was setting over Camp Pendleton as Maria made her final preparations to leave the range. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new questions about her capabilities, and possibly new opportunities to push the boundaries of what was considered possible. But tonight, she would call Emma and tell her about the day when a pink rifle made the impossible shot that changed everything. For 3 weeks after the historic shot, Staff Sergeant Maria Santos found herself in an office at the Pentagon, surrounded by people whose ranks and responsibilities far exceeded anything she had encountered in her 12-year career. The pink rifle that had started everything sat in a secure case beside her chair, its distinctive coating now famous throughout military circles worldwide. Staff Sergeant Santos, said General Patricia Hayes, who had flown back specifically for this meeting. Your demonstration at Camp Pendleton has generated considerable interest at the highest levels of government. The Secretary of Defense wants to understand the implications of what you accomplished. Around the conference table sat representatives from multiple agencies and contractors. Dr. Morrison was present, along with officials from the Army Marksmanship Unit, Naval Special Warfare, and the Air Force's Precision Engagement Programs. Each had questions about how one Marine with unconventional equipment had achieved results that challenged existing doctrine. The ballistic data has been verified independently, reported Colonel Sarah Webb from the Army Research Laboratory. The 6,000-meter hit represents a significant advancement in documented small arms capabilities. We need to understand whether this was an exceptional individual performance or something that can be systematically replicated. Maria sat quietly as the discussion swirled around her, officials debating the implications of her shot as if she weren't present. She understood that her achievement had transcended personal accomplishment to become a matter of national military capability assessment. Staff Sergeant, interrupted Dr. Morrison, we've analyzed every aspect of your rifle and ammunition. The components are commercially available, though assembled with exceptional precision. What we can't replicate is the human factor, your ability to read conditions and make calculations that our computers struggle to match. The meeting had been preceded by 3 weeks of intensive testing and evaluation. Maria had been temporarily assigned to a special research unit, where her methods and equipment had been studied in exhaustive detail. Additional shots at extreme ranges had been attempted under controlled conditions, with mixed results. The follow-up testing has been illuminating, continued Colonel Webb. Staff Sergeant Santos has achieved hits at distances exceeding 5,000 meters on multiple occasions, though success rates vary significantly based on environmental conditions. General Hayes leaned forward across the table. Staff Sergeant, in your assessment, what percentage of military marksmen could achieve similar results given equivalent equipment and training? Maria considered the question carefully. She had worked with many skilled shooters during her career and understood that exceptional long-range marksmanship required a combination of technical knowledge, physical ability, and mental discipline that few possessed. Ma'am, with extensive training and proper equipment, perhaps 5% of expert marksmen could achieve consistent results at distances exceeding 4,000 meters. For shots approaching 6,000 meters, the number drops to less than 1%. The answer confirmed what many in the room suspected. Maria's achievement represented not just exceptional equipment, but exceptional human capability that couldn't be easily replicated through training programs or equipment procurement. There are broader implications to consider, said Admiral Richard Chun from Naval Special Warfare. If our adversaries develop similar capabilities, it could significantly affect battlefield dynamics. We need to understand both the defensive and offensive possibilities. The discussion had evolved beyond Maria's individual performance to strategic considerations that would influence military planning for years to come. Her pink rifle had opened a door to capabilities that military leaders were still learning to understand. Dr. Morrison consulted his tablet computer. We've received requests from 12 allied nations for information about the techniques demonstrated at Camp Pendleton. Everyone wants to understand whether they need to develop similar capabilities or defend against them. What about the rifle itself? Asked Colonel Webb. Can the weapon system be reproduced for wider deployment? Maria finally spoke up. Ma'am, the rifle was custom-built over a period of 5 years. Each component was selected and fitted specifically for my requirements. Mass production would be possible, but individual customization is essential for optimal performance. The answer highlighted a fundamental challenge in military procurement. Exceptional capability often required individual customization that was incompatible with large-scale equipment programs designed to provide standardized solutions. Staff Sergeant Santos, said General Hayes, we're prepared to offer you several options for your future assignment. The Marksmanship Training Unit has requested your transfer to develop advanced long-range shooting curricula. Special Operations Command has expressed interest in your capabilities for specialized missions. There's also a civilian contractor position that would involve weapons development work. Maria had anticipated that her demonstration would lead to new opportunities, but the scope of what was being offered exceeded her expectations. Each option represented a significant change in her military career trajectory. Ma'am, I'd like to remain with operational units if possible. Training and development work is important, but I became a Marine to serve with other Marines. The answer reflected the mindset that had made her exceptional in the first place. Rather than seeking personal advancement, she remained focused on contributing to military effectiveness through direct service. Admiral Chin smiled at her response. Staff Sergeant, that attitude is exactly why you've achieved what you have. But your capabilities could benefit the entire military if properly leveraged through training and development programs. The meeting continued for another hour, covering technical details about ammunition specifications, environmental factors affecting long-range accuracy, and equipment modifications that might enhance performance. Maria answered questions with the same methodical precision she brought to shooting, providing information that would influence military decisions for years to come. As the formal session concluded, Dr. Morrison approached her privately. Staff Sergeant, I want you to understand the significance of what you've accomplished. Your demonstration has fundamentally changed how we think about small arms capabilities. That's a remarkable legacy. Maria nodded thoughtfully. Sir, I just did what I was trained to do, using equipment I prepared as well as I could. The color of the rifle never mattered, only its performance. About that, Dr. Morrison said with a slight smile, the pink coating has become somewhat iconic. We've received requests from other female service members asking about similar customization options. You may have started a trend. The comment reminded Maria of the personal motivation behind her rifle's distinctive appearance. The pink represented her promise to Emma, a commitment that had driven her to pursue excellence even when others doubted her choices. Later that evening, in her temporary quarters near the Pentagon, Maria called her daughter to report on the day's events. "Mom, I saw the news coverage," Emma said excitedly. "They're calling you the most accurate shooter in military history. How does it feel to be famous?" "It feels like I kept a promise," Maria replied quietly. "Remember what you said in the hospital about me needing more pink in my life? That pink rifle has taken us places neither of us imagined. I'm proud of you, Mom. Not just for the shooting, but for proving that people can be exactly who they are while still being the best at what they do." The conversation continued as Maria reflected on the journey from her daughter's hospital room to the Pentagon conference room. The pink rifle had indeed taken them places neither could have imagined, proving that excellence could take many forms and that assumptions about capability were often wrong. The next morning brought new orders that would shape the rest of Maria's military career. She would remain on active duty, but be assigned to a special unit developing advanced marksmanship capabilities for the entire military. Her pink rifle would become the template for a new generation of precision weapons, and her techniques would be studied and taught to marksmen around the world. As she prepared for her new assignment, Maria thought about the Marines who had mocked her unconventional rifle choice. Their skepticism had been understandable, rooted in traditions and assumptions that served the military well in most circumstances. But her achievement had demonstrated that excellence sometimes came from unexpected sources, that innovation could emerge from the most unlikely combinations of tradition and individuality. The pink rifle that had once been the subject of ridicule was now secured in climate-controlled storage, destined for the Smithsonian Institution as an artifact of military history. But Maria would receive a new weapon, built to identical specifications, but with the same distinctive coding that had marked her promise to Emma. Staff Sergeant Maria Santos had silenced more than just the skeptics on a California shooting range. She had proven that dedication, preparation, and the willingness to be different could achieve what others considered impossible. Her 6,000-meter shot would be remembered not just as an exceptional display of marksmanship, but as a demonstration that the most powerful weapon in any military arsenal was the individual Marine willing to pursue excellence regardless of what others thought was possible. The morning sun reflected off the pink coating of her rifle case as Maria Santos prepared for the next chapter of a career that had already exceeded every expectation. Some battles were won with courage under fire, others with dedication and training. But the most important victories came from refusing to be limited by other people's assumptions about what was possible.